to our fifth of 10 webinars in our 2025 Women in Leadership Executive Speaker Series, with this one titled, The Impact of Women's Health on Work and Life. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, Founding Director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and I'm also the Karen Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I'm the host and will be the panel moderator today. This event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. We serve Utah and its residents by first producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. And I know you two have looked at that research and utilized that, which I appreciate that. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, to convene trainings and events like this that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, the John M. Huntsman School of Business and USU Extension, for their support. So I'd like to jump in and introduce our panelists. And what I've decided today is I'm going to introduce Dr. Julie Hanks first. And then Julie, I'm going to ask you, and I know in a lot of settings, we all go by doctor. But when I'm interviewing you, I just slip. And so I'm just going to go for it. And if it's okay, I'll call you by your first names.
Of course. Okay? And can I call you Susan?
Please.
Okay.
So I just try, but it doesn't work sometimes. So what I'd like to do is introduce Dr. Julie Hanks first, and then I would like to ask Julie that first question. And that question is just have you take a few minutes and tell us about your background, your career path, and then I'll introduce our second panelist, Audrey, and have her do the same thing. So I'm just not reading a long bio for both of you. So Dr. Julie Hanks is a licensed therapist, coach, author, relationship expert, media contributor, blogger, speaker, and performing songwriter with 28 years experience counseling women, couples, and families. In addition to owning Wasatch Family Therapy and serving as its executive director, Dr. Hanks is an emotional health and relationship expert and top online media health influencer with an extensive and engaged social media following. And I do know that, Julie. I get on occasionally. I have to do my LinkedIn and social media. It's kind of tough. It takes some time, doesn't it?
Definitely.
As sought after media personality, Dr. Hanks' advice has been interviewed for the Wall Street Journal, Cosmopolitan, Women's Day, Parenting, Reader's Digest, Redbook, and others. And also been on Fox News, Fox Business News, KSL's TV Studio 5, and other shows as well. And Dr. Hanks has written several books, including The Burnout Cure, an emotional survival guide for overwhelmed women. I bet that's popular. And then also an assertiveness guide for women, how to communicate your needs, set healthy boundaries, and transform your relationship. And Dr. Hanks' most valuable experience has been in the trenches of family life as a mother, a wife, and then a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 4. So welcome today, and I would love to have you dive in and start by telling us a little bit about your background and your career path.
Yeah. So I struggled with mental health issues as a teenager, and my parents tried to help me, but they finally just said, we don't know how to help you. Do you want to go to therapy? And I said, yes. And it changed my life. And that kind of planted the seed of like, I want to do this for other people. It opened up my life to this intangible world of thoughts and feelings, of relationship dynamics, and was such a gift. And so I studied psychology and sociology for my undergrad, went on and got my master's in social work at the University of Utah, and then have been working in a private practice setting. And also I started in 2002, started my own clinics, and we have 3 locations in Utah serving kids on up to older adults, see a lot of couples as well. But about 15 years ago, I really felt called to like for whatever reason, like stay on the forefront of social media and get media skills. And I really felt like it was a way that I could educate my community in a different way than just one-on-one or one family at a time. And so that's been a huge part of my professional journey, is using media, social media, and writing to educate and help people that way. So I spend a lot of time doing that now. Anything else that you think I've missed, Susan?
You went back then, and I can't remember what year, but you and I were friends then,
Oh
and
yeah, I went
you
back to
talked about your
yeah.
PhD.
That's right. Oh yeah. So I practiced. So I graduated in '95, and then I graduated in 2015 with my PhD. So 20 years later, and which is now 10 years ago, which is so crazy. But I had the goal of going back to school, and I did an online distance program through University of Louisiana Monroe in marriage and family therapy, and it was transformative. And I wanted to do that to increase my knowledge, of course, but also thought it would open other doors. And so I taught at UVU full time for a couple of years. I teach their adjunct in the social work department, and love mentoring, training, supervising therapists. And my personal passion is women's mental health and relationships.
I love that so much, and I really have appreciated as well in your dissertation work. You know, you really worked on those partnerships and
Mhm.
partnerships in the home,
Yeah,
especially with spouses, partners, whatever, and that's a really important area as well. So you really
yeah,
pushed that about trying to
yeah.
get more equal unpaid care work. Is that what we're going to call it
Well,
today?
yeah, unpaid care work, because that impacts women's mental health in such a real, tangible way, right? When women are employed for pay and also doing the bulk of unpaid work, that's more than one person can do, and so that impacts, physical and mental health. And so that is one of my passions as well. Is making sure that the unpaid care work is shared at home.
So thank you for joining. I really wanted to have in this session, and I'll introduce Dr. Audrey Jiricko in just a second right now. But I wanted to have that mental health and then physical health. Not that there's a pure division, right? Audrey, I know you're in the mental health as well as physical health. Both of you are actually. So let me jump in and introduce Dr. Audrey Jericho. She's a medical doctor and is an OBGYN and also the Senior Medical Director of Women's Health Canyons region for Intermountain Healthcare. And she graduated from Vanderbilt University and then attended Indiana University School of Medicine and completed her residency in Columbus, Ohio at Riverside Methodist Hospital. And she is thrilled to work for an organization committed to comprehensive women's healthcare, which is, in my opinion, getting more important every day, and also moving from production to pre proactive care. So her interests include the development of the Women's Heart Health Program, integrating mental health in the OBGYN setting, improving the screening of pregnant women for substance use disorders, activating screening for intimate partner and sexual violence, and becoming a more trauma informed organization. Dr. Jericho and her family enjoy hiking, backpacking, cross country skiing, and biking. Very active. So I would love to have you jump in and tell us more about your background and your career path and really how you are in the place you're at right now.
Thank you so much, Susan. And it's great to meet Julie. I hadn't met her before, and as we're reading the bios, I'm thinking we need to go out to lunch because I think we have a lot in common. Um, and I would have dressed up for you all. I was telling Susan before this started, I worked a 24-hour shift yesterday, went home and got my breakfast. I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to take a shower, get ready, open my computer. The whole thing blew up, wouldn't work. So I was panic mode of getting here. So I ran over to the Salt Lake Clinic and they kind of saved the day, but I'm still in scrubs, so be happy that this isn't in person. You don't have to sit next to me. Um, I would say, I've been a little bit philosophical. For those of you who know me, I've been dealing with, the death of my mom this year. She was 80 years old and she passed away in August. And that's been really tough for me. And I've been finding myself being really more philosophical about questions. So, this is like describe your career path. And I'm like, let's go back to when my mom used to take me to the library every week. And I just think of the trajectory of my career path and how important that was that she would take me and my three brothers once a week in the summer. We go to the library. We get so excited to get a stack of 10 books, take them home, read about all these things. And I just think about how important that was that we learned to lose ourselves in books. And, that saying, there are no boring days, only boring people. And if you're open to reading and learning, becoming a lifelong learner, being curious, there's always something for all of us. And so I really think that was the start of it when I was in elementary school. And then when I went to college, I took a lot of anthropology, sociology classes. I'm glad I wasn't on a pre-med track because I just kept an open mind in a liberal arts school and studied lots of different things that I was interested in and perspectives from different people from all over the world. And it was really a volunteer program that got me interested in, like, maybe I should think about medicine. It was a program through Vanderbilt University called Alternative Spring Break, where their mission is to motivate students to become active citizens through engagement in their communities. And you would just sign up for it and they'd put you together with, 15 other random students that you probably would never spend time with and never connect with. But, then you have this pod of people going off to do different things. So one of them, one week was in New York City with homebound people with HIV and AIDS, in the 90s. One was in Indiantown, Florida with Guatemalan refugees. So you're just sort of going off, working, sleeping in the basement of some church and eating bagels and, just having this adventure. But I really thought this is so cool to work with a team of people and do a project that's meaningful and work with the community. And if I went into something with healthcare, I could do kind of work in the same way and I could get a job anywhere in the world too. So that's when I decided to go into medicine and just really dove full force into medical school and then residency and kind of accepted that challenge of all the hours and the hard work, but I just knew it would pay off because in the end I'd be able to do this work, working with people in teams, kind of for a good cause. And so I moved and started working in Layton and Ogden and really busy career those first 10 to 15 years, super, super busy. But then about 15 years in, I started getting really interested and curious about the 5 or 10% of my patients who really consume 90% of my time and energy, trying to figure out what's going on with them. And I would just dive in and use all my medical school residency knowledge and OBGYN trying to figure out their chronic abdominal pain and pelvic pain and headaches. And I had the opportunity to integrate. Yeah, see, Julie's like, we're on the same page. The body keeps the score, right? If you haven't read the book, read it. So it was like, it's so crazy that I wasn't taught these things in medical school and residency, but I sort of realized something's not right. My OBGYN knowledge isn't helping me enough. So we integrated mental health into the OBGYN setting. And then I was shocked once I started screening all women for depression and anxiety, how prevalent those were. Then I started thinking, why so much depression and anxiety? And talking to my friends who are social workers and therapists, psychiatrists, and they would say, have you really read the evidence around traumatic stress and the impact of traumatic stress? So I went back to the books and looked through that. And I was really amazed at the incidence of child abuse, neglect, childhood sexual assault, adult sexual assault, and intimate partner violence. And I thought, we don't really do a good job. We have like a generic question about it, but we don't really do a good job asking about these things. And so dove into that and just cracked open a world. And it was like once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And it made me, my husband's always like, this is depressing stuff. Why do you keep talking about this? I get excited because I can see we can help people. Like, now that I know these things and I can screen in the right way because survivors have opened up to me to say, this is kind of my experience. And hey, I've had people say, hey, Jiricko, if you want to know the answers to these screening questions, this is how you should ask it. And that helped me so much. So I sort of developed a workflow based on survivors' needs. And so now I feel really empowered to ask these questions and train other people to ask these questions and really get people to where they need to be. So I can help them with their painful periods and endometriosis and chronic pelvic pain while at the same time um, addressing the fact that they were sexually abused as a child and they would like some help with that. And not everybody wants help with it, but at least I can offer it and get them help. So to me, that's sort of a roundabout way from going to the library to where I am now. And I would just end with, I am a senior medical director. I have no intention of going into administration. I don't have an MBA or a master's in public health or anything, but I think I was working on these projects where I was connecting with people in specialties that are outside my own, where people thought, hey, will you work on this project or that project? Because it was sort of bigger picture type items. So that's how I ended up landing in doing administrative work as well. So
thank you. And one thing I didn't stick in your bio was that you're one of the spoke leaders for the area of health across a lifespan, which is our biggest area in a bolder way forward. And so, and talk about bringing everything together and strategy. This is so strategic. So I'm so glad you're there, and I'm so glad that we've been able to get to know each other this past year or two in that. So thank you for those background. I think that was helpful. And Julie, I could see you like nodding during her introduction.
I'm like, wow. Yes, and yes, we do need to connect more, Audrey.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. So let's dive into some questions and Julie, back to you. So what are some of the biggest changes you've seen? So you've been working in this field for a while now.
30,
but what
over 30 years.
30 years. So what have you seen happen over time in your career that really relates to mental health? But I would throw in physical health too, because I know you've connected in both. What have you seen today from I know enough to make me dangerous, but not what you all know. It feels like from the side research and the different things that some of the issues are increasing, not decreasing. But give us some of the insights.
Yeah, in Utah with the women that I work with, there seems to be an increase in depression, anxiety, and perfectionism. Those tend to be what I see, but I'm also in a private practice, so it's kind of a different, there are different populations, but I tend to work with a higher functioning population. But also, I think there's some really good things. I think women are advocating for themselves more in their family life for what they need. I think women are becoming more and more financially independent in Utah. They are aware of the importance of self-care. So I think there are some positive aspects as well that have to do with education and kind of women's empowerment that are improving.
Thank you for that. I do have to say, however, that we are still in the bottom 3 of mammography rates, and we're 46th of 50 states on preventative health care and some other things like that. So I think you see some shifts in certain areas, but struggles in other areas. So I think I appreciate your insight so much. And with private practice, you've done quite a bit on that perfectionism. So I'm sure people seek you out for that perfectionism.
Yeah. Well, and perfectionism and kind of like high anxiety, high achievement can also be a trauma response. And those people get like validated and get accolades, but there's also a lot of unresolved trauma that comes along with some of the looking good the problems of, higher functioning, higher achieving, perfectionistic, that can be related to trauma as well.
Yeah, I just read another article that had perfectionism in it, and there's some ways that we're taught as young women, as girls, that lead to actually that. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. Audrey, I would love to have you talk about this as well. So you've been in this for some decades as well. What have you seen over time in your career as it relates to mental and physical health, and why do you think that is? I didn't ask you that, Julie, so maybe you can
Mm.
jump in after. So why do you think that is?
Well, Julie, you want to speak to your theories first, and then
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Jump in.
Um, I would say from physical health, one thing that's pretty remarkable, we were just talking about it on labor and delivery just last night, is the increase in chronic illnesses. So things like diabetes, hypertension, and obesity has really profoundly changed from the way I practiced 20 years ago to what we're seeing now in pregnancy related conditions. If you just look in just for diabetes, for instance, from 2000 to 2024, those diabetes rates increased from 7 to 16%, hypertension from 30 to 50%, and obesity from 30 to 42%. And so we see that during pregnancy as, higher rates of gestational diabetes and diabetes that's harder to manage, high blood pressure and leading to preeclampsia, and all those things can lead to other problems like growth restricted babies or higher rates of C-sections or blood clots and things like that. So we've definitely seen that. Um, and I'm not exactly sure, I think the food industry is brilliant. There are a lot of chemists who have figured out exactly what our brainstem wants. And, I know for myself, there are certain things I just can't even keep in my pantry because I have no self control over these things. The food industry is pretty amazing. Um, that's why I think that the priorities moving forward of thinking about what do we want to prioritize for our communities, for our children, for our grandchildren around nutrition and exercise, and how do we model that behavior to the best of our abilities. I mean, it's a big battle that we're facing, but it really is impacting people's health lives across the lifespan, and then also during pregnancy as well.
Yeah, and I haven't read a lot. I haven't had the space to read a lot about the impact of social media. We know I know the social media impact on girls and young women, not necessarily older, but environmental things have got to be part of this as well, from nutrition to other things as well. Julie, any thoughts from you on those? Like, why are things
Yeah.
harder right now, and things
Well,
kind of getting worse? We know from the girls and young women research in social media that's really linked to anxiety and depression and some of those things. What are you
yeah.
seeing
And
or
for women too. I also think that our lifestyle, most people have desk jobs. They're not physically active as part of like physical activity is a thing you have to plan in your day. It's not built into life like it used to be, or right, work in the land. And so I think there's a lot of systemic things that have changed. Like Audrey said, the food industry, that activity is not built into our lives anymore. I think there's social isolation because we're so mobile and jobs are, it's like people don't live in little communities with their extended families anymore. So I think people are more isolated. Um, I'm a huge fan of social media, and like I think there's a lot of benefits, and I think there's a lot of downside, right? And one of that is a decrease in face-to-face interaction, which is really important. I think digital interaction is great, right? I love talking with you here, but it's not the same as being in the same room. And there are some things that we get emotionally by touch and regulating each other's emotions that we need to be in person to do. So I think that isolation is a big piece of the mental health in particular.
Yeah, and you're seeing that, Julie and Audrey, both of you, in women of various ages. And I would think even the women that are elderly, much older than me. I'm getting in that you really see some of that isolation even more during the pandemic, I think, especially.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
seeing this in all ages?
Yes, yes. And there social media, I've also seen with some older adults, helps keep them connected to
Oh,
extended family too, in a way that they couldn't before if they don't live close. So, right, it's a tool, and it's like fire, right? Fire warms it, also it can burn you. And so social media is like it's a tool, and there's positive, there's negative to it.
thank you. And Audrey, I wanted to go over to you. I mean, both of you spend your days in different ways counseling women, right? I mean, that's what you do. So, what is one critical tip, especially with Utah women, but that's who you work with regarding their health? If you just have to give one or even two tips, what do you say? What Audrey, what do you tend to say to women that is more consistent across many women?
You know what? Yeah, when you see high volumes of people, you see hundreds and thousands of people over many years, where are people thriving and what are the things that bring them joy and happiness and general health and well-being? And I would say, there's kind of, you want one thing, but I would say there's four things. One is these folks really foster healthy relationships,
Mm,
and number one, and connections with other humans, and they put a lot of time and energy into it. And if they have unhealthy relationships, which we all pretty much, at some point, either with a parent or sibling or spouse or friend, they
or
seek help
child,
for
can
it.
I just put child? Sometimes your children are, and you can't just like say, I'm not going to have, well, maybe you could, but, um, but children can cause stress.
Yeah, and seeking help, like reading and absorbing these things, it's not intuitive always, It's kind of like with breastfeeding. I tell people they think, "Oh, this is just a natural thing. I just, do this and the baby will figure it out." It's not it's that easy, and sometimes you have to read and study and learn. And I think learning how to communicate in an effective way with other people and learning how to see when a relationship is healthy or unhealthy or going in the wrong direction, getting professional help when you need it. So health is huge. People who minimize screen time, and I don't know how Julie's going to feel about this, but we know people who are on screens for more than 2 hours a day are more depressed and more anxious. It's just a fact. Now, we're probably all on screens for more than 2 hours a day at this point. But like I think the research is pretty clear. We need to have a balance with that. um, People with really great well-being, they're physically active daily and it's just part of their thing. But like Julie said, it's not a scheduled out, I've got to go do CrossFit for X amount of time. If you love and enjoy CrossFit and it's a social thing for you, fantastic. If you love to go to a track and run 3 miles, great. But for many people, it's more, let's go for a hike, let's go for a walk, let's play pickleball, finding something physically active and then also tapping into nature. You don't have to do a big backpacking trip, but just appreciating the outdoors, just gardening or going for a walk and looking at the birds and breathing clean air, hopefully. I think those are the things. If I think of my patients who really like sustained well-being, I don't really like the term happiness because I feel like people feel like they need to be happy all the time, and that's not really what life is about. And from what I've witnessed, I think it's about well-being, and I think people who have healthy relationships limit their screen time, get outdoors to some extent, and are physically active tend to be, on average, have better physical and mental health. So I'd love to hear what Julie thinks about it.
Yeah, because you really crossed that physical, mental, all kinds of health with your answers, which I love.
Yeah.
Julie, one other thing I wanted to pop in before move it over to Julie. So my master's degree was in exercise physiology and wellness, and I remember so many years ago reading um, an article, a research article on fidgeting, and generally, no matter how, if you fidget more, you tend to burn 300, 500 calories a day. But I thought that was, that just popped in my mind. Sometimes we're just telling, especially our little girls, stay so still, stay still. And the little boys are fidgeting and so forth. But there's some interesting things that happen with our body when we move more. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in. Julie, over to you with that same question.
Yeah.
And then
I
I watch the chat a little bit because there's some of the questions coming in that I think are applicable too. So, Julie?
Wonderful. Yeah, I would just add to what Audrey said. The ability to know what you need, what you think, feel, want, and need, to identify that and to advocate for getting your own needs met. And so that, like, when you know yourself, you can identify your emotions, you can regulate your emotions, then you can have better relationships. So I would just add that piece of self relationship, just, and the act of accurately identifying and labeling an emotion reduces the intensity of the emotion. So just saying I am furious makes you less furious, right? Or I'm right. So there are some basic skills that I think relating to identifying your thoughts and feelings and what you need and want. And my biggest advice to almost everyone I've ever worked with is prioritize yourself so you can be your best self in those relationships. And so many women that I've worked with are so into self-sacrifice that they're actually modeling self-neglect for their daughters instead of modeling healthy self-care. So it's not about just taking care of relationships, it's about taking care of yourself, so then you are available in those relationships.
And I would add another piece, I think, to both of yours. It is we really, when we look at women's careers, what we do in the home, what we do with ourselves, how we feel, impacts everything in our career too, right? It just impacts how we show up and our
Right.
relationships too. So I think our discussion here relates to all areas of our life, including women's career. If we're overwhelmed with whatever it might be, and I see a note from someone that said we've also seen an increase in breast and ovarian cancer. So just that worry about our health and other people's health and all of that relates, right? Um, so, uh, have you been watching the chat? Do you have anything you want to pull in? Um,
I responded, Susan. I don't know if you can see to a couple of
I
them.
don't
So
think they
yes,
can see our responses, but
increased risk in cancers. So cancers associated with obesity, especially because women who are overweight have more estrogen circulating, so more higher risks of breast and endometrial cancers. And the good news is you don't have to like lose a ton of weight. Even just losing 10% of body weight will decrease the risk of those cancers. So, yeah, something to watch there. And then I said, thanks to Jen, I wish we were all together so that we could have a big room and discuss together. That's the downside to this, but
absolutely. And another one was about remote work, but Julie, you talked about that, where remote work is really important actually for us to have flexibility. But when you do it all the time and don't get in person, that's when it there's a struggle, right? Any other?
yeah. The internet brought the possibility of work back into the home, which is huge, especially for women, and has impacted in positive and difficult ways, right? But I think the flexibility is amazing. Like you can turn off the computer, go pick up your child, but I think it also can increase the stress and increase isolation too, because you're not interacting face to face with coworkers. There's isolation. So like everything is just, it seems like it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I know the research continues to say in terms of remote work, one of the things that worries me, honestly, is our organizations, including government, right? Or any workplace that is changing 100% back to in person, which we know 100% impacts and causes more stress on women when they don't
Yeah.
have the flexibility they need. And
Right.
so I'm seeing that more and more, and I'm like, be thoughtful, companies, because there's a lot of good work that can be done at home.
Yeah.
However, the research for 2 decades continues to say that it's still good to have a 2, 3 days, in the office or 2 or 3 days at
Mhm.
home. That's a better combination of things for our isolation for other things as well, but also
Yeah.
for parents, not just mothers, right? But parents in general who need flexibility, who want to be there for their children and can want that flexibility. Any other thoughts, Julie? You see?
I just was going to say, part of why I wanted to own a business is so I could provide flexible workplaces for women. So you can work 3 days a week, um, and that's considered full time, and you can get benefits, and so you can have two work days at home with your family, and so that I'm really passionate about providing opportunities for other therapists to have work life integration, without having to go to work every day, all day.
Yeah, I
And
love
I
that.
would just say the flexibility that I've seen in the last 20 years on schooling is amazing because there were so many, when I moved here from the Midwest 20 years ago, there were all these like just super bright women and they had started their families really young and because of the school having to go to class and do all that. They just weren't going to college. And it what a difference it is now when you can go to night school and you can go to online school and you can go to part-time school. And so that's been
Hmm.
fantastic.
Thank you. And Audrey, last month you were invited to the White House as part of its initiative on women's health research. So, what did you learn that can help improve women's health in our state?
Yeah, that was it was a big surprise. It was kind of this last minute invitation to represent Intermountain Health at the first ever women's White House Women's Health Conference. And it was really to highlight the 2023 Women's Health Initiative to address gaps in women's health. So things like cardiovascular health in women, which still heart disease is the #1 killer of women. We always worry about breast cancer and other cancers, which we should, and we need to get the screening, but really our cardiovascular risk is what
Yeah.
we need to make sure our blood pressure is okay, cholesterol levels, weight's okay. Cardiovascular fitness is so important. Things like menopause, endometriosis, and things that traditionally haven't received necessarily the grant funding that it deserves. So, the administration was able to secure about $1 billion in funding for women's health research in 2023, and this event was to celebrate. Okay, what have we done? What have we got started? And then what do we need to do next?
Mm.
And I think a couple of things I took away from it. One was the importance of convening with people outside of your sphere. It was so great to go and talk to other people in other healthcare systems. There were people who were clinicians like myself that take care of patients, but then also researchers, lab researchers. There were investors, there were policymakers, um, all sorts of people from different aspects, from different areas of the country. So I think that's so important. We get into our own little niche with the same types of people in the same community, in the same sphere, in the same profession. And it's so good to bust out of that and talk to some other people to get good ideas. And then the second thing, I think, speaking of perfectionism, I always like we could do this better. And I think this is why I connect with Susan so well. Like we're doing well enough. We can do better. We need to be exceptional. We need to strive for excellence. And we're constantly looking at that. And I think going to the White House and being able to talk to other people, realizing, wow, we're doing a lot of amazing things in Utah. And, University of Utah with its population health medical students that they're training, and Intermountain is really focusing on a lot of proactive care and thinking about how do we actually keep people healthy and pay providers to keep people healthy instead of just paying them to operate on people and admit them to the hospital. What are we really trying to get out of this? And BYU is going to be starting a medical school. Like, Utah is doing some incredible things. So I think if we can keep that energy up around the importance of women's health, I mean, it's 50% of the population. We really need to attend to this, and we can keep kind of the research dollars going. And I think, there were people there from Wall Street who were investors who were very interested in some of these areas and opportunities. So I think it's exciting. There are a lot more women in research in all of these fields now too, which is helpful to drive that.
Audrey, in Utah, do we have spaces like that you had where you get public policy, all those people together?
Bolder way forward.
It is, but I don't know if anyone else was doing that. Probably not then before.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have little things here and there, or you'd have a conference where you'd meet somebody else and you kind of make connections. But that's one of the things that I really love about Boulder Way Forward is it's such a diverse group of people from all over the state with different interests and different skills. That just like bringing those people together, I think is so powerful.
And as I'm looking at both of you, I'm thinking we do need to get some really good conversations going between mental health, people that specialize in mental health, and physical health, even though you've gotten, Audrey, into that mental health, because there's some questions as a researcher. There's some questions, and one I just recently published about, like, why are women in Utah, even more than the nation, not doing their preventative health care appointments once a year, not doing their mammography. And I wrote a piece, I don't know if either of you saw that in the Tribune a couple of weeks ago, about the illusion of choice. The women choose to do different things. It's those messages. Why are women in Utah, maybe more than the nation, saying, wait, I'm supposed to be selfless. I'm supposed to take care of everyone else and myself. That to me would be, Julie, I would love to hear your comments on that. But that would be such an important issue to link between women's health professionals and mental health professionals, to me, to wrestle through that so that our language, even my language, right, can be better to encourage those good behaviors. That was kind of a long little thing, but Julie, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I've been focusing a lot on the Latter-day Saint population and encouraging women to take care of themselves, because I think part of the self-sacrificing is kind of interpretation of religious teachings, right? Like that's more noble. When I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually self-neglect, and so I think we have a long way to go in counterbalancing that message, that it's not just others and it's not just us. It's about both. It's the interplay, and when we're healthy as women, then we can serve other people. We have more to give, and so I've worked a lot trying to send that message of like it's okay. Like your needs matter too. You're in the same. Put yourself in your circle of care.
Yeah, I love that. We need to. I think there's a lot of work to do there, Julie. And I wanted to give you one more question, Julie. And I'm looking at the time. I was thinking we were like 20 minutes in, and we're not 20 minutes in. Right?
We only have 12 more minutes. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, I know. So Julie, research indicates that mental health issues are significantly, we kind of talked about a piece of this, significantly increasing, particularly among young adults, with reports showing a rise in the prevalence of mental health across various age groups, with the most notable increase 18 to 25. So we talked a little bit about causes, but what are some of your thoughts, perceptions, experiences in that age group? And actually, Audrey, uh, that's an interesting, I don't know how many patients you see, but I'm sure there's in that age group, but I'm sure there's some increasing issues physically in those age groups as well. Julie.
Yeah, I don't know if I can point to any specific cause. I know social media is part of that. Um, but I think there's kind of uh, in the broader culture, there's a lot of like in uncertainty, like what should I do? Like failure to launch kind of issues,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like overwhelm about being, moving into adulthood. And like my grandparents' generation, you graduate from high school, you get married, you get a job, and now it's kind of like there's so many options, right? People don't get married till later, and should I go to school? Should I go to tech school? So I just think there's a lot of uncertainty with this age group, and then that age group is a common onset for mental health, right? Young adulthood is a high uh, level of onset for mental health. And so I think if they're stressed, uncertain, then we're seeing that triggering mental health.
Thank you so much. And Audrey, back over to you because you brought up a few times the Boulder Way Forward. It and you can comment about that age group as well, but I know you're passionate about and would love to bring in the career element of this as well, about that we need healthcare and to be healthy across the whole lifespan, right? I mean, from and so in the spoke that you have in the Boulder Way Forward, there's 8 different sub spokes, and all of them are so important. Just tell us why it's so important for us as women to be thoughtful about and concerned about and thinking about our health all along, and how we as Utahns need to help help in all areas.
Yeah,
Wow,
I think
I
it
just gave you
all
like 3 questions there.
it all crosses over and flows over as we talk about it. You can sort of hear the themes happening, but if you look at what we're focusing on in Boulder Way Forward, it's access to healthcare, prevention, mental health, trauma-informed care, adolescence, reproductive health, and perimenopause and menopause. And it's like they all affect each other, because if you have someone in middle age who's not doing well and not functioning at a high level, they're the ones caring for a lot of the rest of the family. And so it has trickle down effects there. And if you don't have access, or if you don't address traumatic stress and the impacts, I mean, the talking to each other, as Julie was speaking, I was just thinking of a lot of patients where they'll come in and they'll start talking, and it's sort of this, they see social media and what they should be, or what they think they should be in these vulnerable ages. And I love seeing 40 to 60-year-old women, honestly, because they get to a point where they're like, you know what? I am
Who
who I
cares?
am. I am not gonna like play around here and have a really boring conversation about the weather. Like, I'm done with it. I want to like dig in, be authentic, be myself, really find out what my interests are. And I think a lot of times it's hard in your 20s and 30s, and you're trying to find your way, and you think that you should look like this, or like this music, or do this, dress this way, whatever it may be. There's so much pressure there. And people come in stressed and crying and like really in a bad place. And I tell everyone, you need to talk to your friends, because they all come into me crying. You guys are all doing the same thing, but you're not talking to each other. Same thing with very young mothers. A lot of mothers with a bunch of kids, or even just 2 toddlers. That's all it takes. Maybe just 1 toddler, where you feel like you have to perform at this specific level and just be at the top of your game all the time. And your kids need to look perfect and behave perfect, and your yard needs to be great, and your house needs to be perfect. I'm like, you know what? You're raising kids. Throw it all out the window. Your priority is love and concern and play with that child. That's your priority. If you got a pile of laundry, you know. So I think talking to each other and being real, which is hard because you got to be vulnerable there, but being real about the realities of how hard life is and the struggle and sharing those things with each other is really, really powerful. And if you can find a group of friends, you don't need a ton, but just even 2 or 3 people where you can really be honest, I think that goes a really long way.
Thank you so much. And I could see Julie nodding. I do want to just say, because I know you're passionate about this, is that, our percentages and numbers of women who experience violence, whether it's sexual assault, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, like you talked about, that follows you, are really high here in Utah. And we just have to, if things happen to us, if we see other people, we have to get them resources. We have to talk about it. Julie, I expect you. Man, we could go so many directions, and we have
I
like
know we have
5 minutes.
5 minutes left. I'm like, oh, what's Susan going to direct us to?
Well,
Oh,
I know that is critical. That so many. I mean, it's estimated 1 in 6 women are raped in the state of Utah, and this and that. That's so critical for our physical and mental health to be able to um, um, have safe spaces to talk about it. And I know,
yeah.
Audrey, you're really pushing, and I support this, that medical professionals screen, that ask those questions so that people. Any thoughts, Julie? And then I think I'm just going to go with. There's so many questions and different things, and we'll. But I'm going to go with just some closing thoughts for both of you. What would be most important for you to share? But Julie, any thoughts about that question?
Well, I think there's kind of two pieces. There's
Yeah.
prevention, right? Dealing with the systemic problems and men having entitlement and power over women. And, and then there's also what if it happens, knowing the resources,
Yes.
being able to encourage your friend or your sister, or your mother, or whoever it is to like go get support, go get trauma therapy. This matters. This, you can't just pretend it doesn't matter. I see so many women in my practice who have abuse, unresolved trauma from decades ago, right? That it's never been addressed, and it impacts every area of their life: relationships, mental health, physical health. And so, I encourage everybody listening, and encourage you to encourage your loved ones to seek help. There are amazing trauma informed therapists in Utah. So highly recommend help. And yeah, I mean, we could do a whole other thing about the systemic things of prevention, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we conclude, let's have each of you just take a minute and connect what we've been talking about with with women's careers, because as we look at the title of this, the impact of women's health on work and life, right? Life impacts work. Any final thoughts on um, Audrey and Julie? You could go various directions on this, but we just have a few minutes left. It's been a fun conversation. Audrey, any final thoughts?
Well, I'll keep it short, but I would just say the science is pretty clear on well-being. We know what it takes, and it's 3 things. One is having choice and control. 2 is having passion and mastery over something, and 3 is community and contribution. People who have those 3 ideas of things tend to have a really high well-being, and I think you just can't go wrong when you're trying to frame your career. I think people get stuck on, what am I going to be? What is the label that I'm going to be? And I have to choose, and it's just like, you know what? You just got to dig in. You got to delay gratification. Sometimes I went through really hard times and worked really long hours, and it was very inconvenient, at a lot of points in my life. But that gave me choice and control as I got older, and just always kind of following that passion and mastery concept, and then being able to contribute to your community and feel like you're giving something back is really powerful too. So I feel like people stick with those, you're not going to go the wrong way.
I love that. And one last follow-up quick question. Is there a resource, and we can put this in a follow-up email, that you would recommend? Pages, I'm sure, or a book. What would you recommend? And Julie, I'll ask you a similar question.
There's a book called, I'll put it in the chat. It's
Okay.
called Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life.
Okay.
That's a great one. I'll put that in there.
And Julie, final thoughts.
I have worked with so many women who in their midlife or later life regret that they didn't do what they wanted to do for work, that they sacrificed something for, or they had an idea of like, well, I can't do that because I can't have a family. And I just want to encourage women to, like, you have passions for a reason, and your passion will help you know where you can make the biggest contribution to the world while you're here on the planet, and to go with your passion. Don't limit yourself based on your future relationships, because you don't know what's going to happen. And I just have worked with hundreds and hundreds of women in Utah who gave up a passion when maybe they didn't have to, and then kind of regret it. So your passions matter, and use that to inform the contribution that you make regarding your work.
Thank you so much. And we'll put the resources in the follow-up email, including a link to both of your books, Julie. So
Great.
Just so, because I was going to say that you probably recommend those. So, oh, wow. I have really, really appreciated both of you and your contributions in our discussion. I'm surprised it went as quick as it did. We could have gone to a million different directions, right? And so thank you to both of you for that. And also thank you to our sponsors, the John M. Huntsman School of Business and UXU Extension, for making this event possible.